On this episode of Boundary Breakers, I sit down with Dave Bastone. Dave is the CEO of Regenerate Technologies, fascinating business that has figured out how to recycle lithium ion and lead batteries and turn them into raw materials that are actually more efficient and more valuable than they were the first time around. Dave's a fascinating guy, innovative entrepreneur, venture capitalist who got to start in Silicon Valley, just full of wisdom. I really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. Dave, thanks again so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to this one. Can you give us just a little bit of background on yourself and sort of where you grew up, maybe some family, just your origin story?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the Midwest. So I grew up, born in Chicago, grew up in the university town, Champaign-Urbana, University of Illinois. 18 years old, I decided that I wanted to go west, and I went to university in Santa Barbara. And I was very clear on day two that I would never leave the West Coast. Especially Santa Barbara is such a gorgeous place. And I have been out west since. I have a home today in Lake Tahoe in California.
Beautiful.
But really, the journey the journey begins. I was a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
And I was, those are the early days of the internet and information technologies. And a very unusual, unexpected event interrupted my life. That I discovered that my favorite restaurant in San Francisco was the center of a human trafficking ring that had brought 500 young teenage girls from India into the United States for the purpose of forced labor. First in the restaurant, and then they were taken out to the fruit and vegetable fields of California, factories and brothels. So it was, human slavery, human trafficking. And,
wow.
For whatever reason, it grabbed me that when I learned that this was happening in my own backyard. And I felt like I needed to do something about it. So I took a year leave of absence. At the time, I was both a university professor at the University of San Francisco, as well as a venture capitalist. I was part of my firm. And I decided to go around the world and follow the money. And I went from San Francisco to India, went from Los Angeles to Thailand, where I had met in Los Angeles a group of young Thai women who had been trafficked into LA. And eventually that journey took me to Peru, where a lot of young people from Latin America had been trafficked into the United States. And it really was a discovery in Peru that a lot of these young kids were coming from the Amazon region, from native tribes and native communities. And I began working with these communities and helping them to set up economic platforms that would give them more protection or inoculation from being so vulnerable, taken advantage of. And it was in that process I saw the relationship between environment or ecology and the people, the tribes of that area. And they were being at risk because of the degradation of the Amazon and the waste of so many resources. And it was at that time I said, I began to move into more areas of renewable energy and environmental sustainability in the process of helping these tribes to get their own kind of sustainability and their own lives together.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so I'd love to spend 2 or 3 minutes on this human trafficking issue, if that's all right.
Sure.
I think that this would be a really good chance to help educate both myself and the audience on human trafficking. It's a buzzword as of late because it's gotten so bad. But a lot of us sort of hear it and maybe discuss it from afar, right? And it's very difficult, I think, for some people to understand in today's day and age, like how this can happen, or how this does happen. Maybe not how it can happen, but how it does happen. And I'm sure that there are 40 or 50 or 60,000 different ways that this can happen. But
Yeah.
can you help sort of walk us through, in your experience, like what's an example of how these people are taken from where they are, how they're sort of like what constitutes the kind of the bond that they can't get away from, and then what happens to them once they get here?
No, it's a great question, and probably the first case that I presented to you, young girls from India being brought into the United States, is the most unusual case. That's less typical, um, and I think the word human trafficking does suggest that somehow it's moving people around the world. What I discovered in my investigation that year I went around the world was that most of it takes place within a 10-mile radius of where people live. We'd probably better be served by using the term human slavery, where in this case, say in the Amazon of Peru, it was that they're poor, they don't have good protection from the rule of law. In many respects, they're considered, ironically, not full citizens of Peru or Brazil, but even though they've been there for thousands of years. But what would happen is that they would either be forced to work, they would just be coerced to work, or they would be put into a situation where they would be given a loan, and then in order to pay off that loan, they had to use their labor, and that's the most common form. It's called debt bondage, and so the egregious interest rates, it just keep going more and more in debt, and now it's years of servitude that they need to perform in order to pay off that debt. In the Amazon of Peru, I found that a lot of it came from illegal mining and illegal logging in the area, and these mines and these logging operations would use the labor of the local people to kind of further their own ends. So it's very complicated. But I discovered that as a venture capitalist, the biggest contribution I could make, one is to be at the end of a river and a bunch of bodies are drowning, you're pulling them out and they're flailing. And that's great. That's, I call it compassion, but it's strategic to go upstream and figure out how you stop them from falling in. And one way that I discovered to do that is to provide economic platforms that would reduce their vulnerability, reduce their need to take loans, reduce their, create economies that would work. So what I did actually, Brandon, is I started a company, a for-profit company called Rebel, and it's one of the top organic beverages in America today, REBBL, and you can buy it in Target and Whole Foods and Safeway and most grocery stores. And what we do is we would source the ingredients, the rich herbs from the Amazon, matcha, maca, guasana leaf, all these great herbs. This is before this whole organic revolution. This was back in 2012. And then we create stable jobs, and then we sell the beverage in American retail stores. And for every bottle a consumer buys, 10 cents would go back to and be investing in the infrastructure of those communities. So we've now invested about $2.5 million back into those communities.
Wow.
From just the revenue sharing. And Rebel on the bottle will say, you're helping to serve this cause. You're being a part of empowering people. But at the end of the day, you got to create a great product, and it's a great product.
Wow. Well, good for you. I mean, it sounds like this was something that really tugged on your heartstrings, and you put your money where your mouth is, and
well, we're going to talk about a lot of strategy, intellectual things, but at the end of the day, what's most important is what's your passion in your heart, and this really is at the core of how I think about business and how I approach investing. And we all choose a path, and for me, this is my path.
Yeah, well, I love it. Well, hats off to you, and I appreciate the summary there. So that makes a whole lot more sense to me. Not unlike how a lot of folks in this country get caught up in a vicious cycle of debt. But from what I understand, I mean, we have the rule of law that helps prevent, violence or people from taking, just essentially taking somebody to pay off the debt. But in other places where they don't enjoy those protections, that same type of cycle, doesn't end up at bankruptcy court. It ends up, getting taken to another country and having to work in servitude for a couple of decades.
No, that's a great analysis, because it is the case that we have it's the combination of debt and a weak rule of law. You're right, because there are people, we hear about people who fall into homelessness, but there are safety net, places for people who fall into debt, and out and out kind of slavery or exploitation is not something that would be allowed under the rule of law, the application of it. But in many places in the world, that doesn't exist. So you understand correctly how it can happen then.
Yeah, that's interesting. I appreciate that. Well, so you followed your heart. You created Rebel. Was Rebel, I guess as a venture capitalist, you always have your sort of fingers in lots of different businesses.
Yeah, I did.
So keep going. This is fascinating. So take us back and after Rebel, and what are some of the other things that you got involved with?
So there's two examples that kind of talk about breaking boundaries. I went from there and I wanted to use that model elsewhere, and so I went to Amsterdam, where there's considerable amount of commercial sex industry, and we're not an anti-prostitution, or I'm not against prostitution. People want to make that choice. Hopefully, my family and my kids don't do that, but
right.
It's not, that's not my prerogative. So, but what I do is that there's a lot of women who were brought into the commercial sex industry in Amsterdam. It's kind of seen as a global Disneyland for men, particularly, to go on sex holidays. But the reality is that probably 70% of these young women are forced to do what they're doing. And so, again, rather than simply kind of a protest against, or kind of it create an alternative, create a better economy. And so I worked to start a culinary school to teach young women to be chefs and caterers. The mayor of Amsterdam gave us a former brothel to start a restaurant, and we started a company. Now there's 5 restaurants in the Netherlands called Dignity, and they're fantastic restaurants. Vogue magazine calls us one of the top 10 restaurants in Amsterdam, not because of our social mission, because it's great food, but really the heart behind it is to give opportunities for these young women to move out of the coercion life they're living, to be able to create a profession or create a sense of dignity. So that and all of the expansion of the restaurants to, we have, as I mentioned, 5, has come from the profits of the restaurants themselves. So it's a economically self-viable business. So that's on the kind of the social side. Yeah. But then I began to get involved in the environmental sphere. And I've invested in a few companies, and one that's really relevant here is a company called American Battery Technology Company. And I became one of the early investors and joined the board. And it's focused on the recycling of lithium-ion batteries, say a Tesla battery, or say a battery in your laptop. And we took that company to the NASDAQ, where it is today. And it really was an attempt to create, the problem with, we talk about EV vehicles, and they become a little bit controversial in the United States right now, is that, what about the battery? Right. And also the energy that it takes to power a battery.
Right.
And so, I didn't create that industry, but I saw that there was better solutions to it. And that's what's taken me down the road to Regenerate. So I invested in American Battery. I was on the board. And then I decided to leave because I saw there was a more international mission that I could carry out, and that's where I am today.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, so maybe this is a good chance to sort of just clear the air from a high level. I mean, you hear a lot about, well, look, obviously the premise of electric vehicles is that they don't have internal combustion engines, therefore they don't pollute. We're not relying on foreign oil. The rebuttal to that is, well, the energy that it takes to, the energy that goes into the battery or into the call it the construction of the car exceeds the sort of negative energy cost of an internal combustion engine. And then what do you do with the batteries once these things run drivable? So can you help sort of set the record straight? First of all, is there an energy sort of net energy loss problem on the front end with the amount that has to go in, or is that just sort of fake science?
No, I think it sometimes is exaggerated. I think it's pretty net even in terms after a few years. It evens itself out, but that's not good enough, right? It's presented as a solution to climate change or to the contribution of greenhouse effect. Whereas I think you have to be really straightforward about saying, well, what powers the grid that enables the charging of the batteries? Probably 95% is not renewable energy. So, and then you look at the battery itself. The amount of minerals that are needed, it requires quite a bit of mining. That goes beyond, say, the mining of a typical Ford, Bronco that you have in your driveway.
Right.
And so, those materials, are considerable. And then at the end of life, they were not being recycled very efficiently. And to me, it really was a bit of a dream that was being sold. And so I still believe that we're going to live in a hybrid future, but I don't see this as a panacea for all of the problems that a vehicle might contribute to the greenhouse effect.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, so to us who aren't, who don't have PhDs or aren't in the industry, from a lay perspective, what all goes into these batteries? So let's just take lithium ion, right? I mean, what are these the rare earth minerals that that they require for some of these chips and things? But what all goes into it, and why are they quote unquote dangerous or harmful to the environment?
Right. So probably the most known is lithium, and lithium really only makes up about 6% of a lithium-ion battery, which is ironic.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Other materials, cobalt, manganese, nickel, and those are the key ones. So you might hear sometimes people referring to an NMC lithium battery, which is nickel, manganese, and cobalt.
Okay.
And so probably those your listeners are familiar with cobalt being problematic. Apple struggles with their access to cobalt, and there's a lot of controversy about, say, mines in the Congo. Kind of, it's looked at as the blood diamond, but the blood minerals.
Right.
And then lithium is also a challenge in terms of sourcing it. A lot of it takes place either in Latin America, South America, or Africa. There are reserves that are being discovered in the United States. And so American Battery, my company, we were able to secure quite a bit of land in Nevada for lithium for batteries. But I'll say that, so one is the problem of safety around a lithium battery. And the other is where do all these minerals come from and who controls the commodities? Well, 80% of those minerals today are coming from China. And China has really locked up resources, not only in Asia, but in Africa.
Yep.
And so, we can talk about what geopolitical or economic risks that carry for, say, the United States and Europe and other countries, but just on a level of the amount of investment that's needed in order to make these batteries. That's why the cost of a battery is half the cost of the Tesla or any other electric car. Half of it is the battery, and so this is one of the things that Regenerate, my company, aims to solve and contribute to. But I think it's really worthwhile pointing out the dilemma.
Yeah, no, and now that we're talking about it, it's multidimensional, right? I mean, I'm sure there's the argument about the sort of the scarcity of these minerals, right? Are there enough of these? And then you've got the labor conditions of the people that are pulling them out. Then you've got what do you do with them afterward? And then you have the whole folks saying, well, wait a minute. We're taking all this energy and all this effort because we don't want to be reliant on foreign oil. Now we're going to be reliant on China. It could be six one way, half dozen the other. But so it is your company solves, if you're able to efficiently recycle these batteries, your company solves a lot of issues on a lot of different levels, not just like a purely economic one where it's going to potentially lower the cost and be a more efficient battery. So,
absolutely, it's we're mining existing resources. So take the lead acid battery that everyone who has an automobile has a lead acid. That square thing that you hope lasts a long time, and sometimes you have to go down to the local auto repair shop and get a new one. But that
or pour distilled water in it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, say lead is one of the most successfully recycled products in the world, but 85% of the lead that we use comes from existing battery supplies. Now, what regenerate? We can talk about lead acid because we're upcycling those materials, the lead, to make it even a better battery, but again, using the existing materials. I see the same for lithium ion, is that we can get to the point where a high percentage of our batteries for the future come from the existing batteries. So it's not that we need to keep mining more and more holes in the ground.
Right.
I saw a statistic the other day, which I think quite credible, was that if we look at the number of cars that we have projected for 2030, we only have the minerals available for 1 out of 4. So where are those minerals going to come from? And it's a massive mining project, which again, if you care about the environment, that's not something that looks very rosy.
Right.
And even the economics of that, is that and the geopolitical aspect of that. So I could go on and on, but this is why I when I chose, like, how am I going to spend my money and my time, and I'm very passionate about trying to help contribute to a better world. I saw this was a worthy problem of spending time on.
Yeah, I can see how.
And we're talking about vehicles right now, Brandon. Imagine all the data center batteries, with AI. It's gone. Energy demand's gone up tenfold from, say, Microsoft.
Right.
So where did all those batteries come from? The same materials, right? And they're turning to lithium ion if they're not using lead. So this is, critical minerals is a big part of our economy now and into the future.
For sure. And I was just taking some notes. I've got a bunch of questions I want to talk about the energy demand here in just a minute, because I think that's really interesting too, and that presents a really interesting problem that I don't see a whole lot of people talking about. But I'm curious. So is the reason why there isn't currently sort of a robust recycling, economy, or we're not recycling these types of batteries as much as we do lead or others? Is that just simply because these are newer and the infrastructure to recycle hasn't sort of been set up, or is there some type of inherent difficulty or cost? Or talk us through the process of.
It's actually both things, and I will be. It's because again, we could probably spend an hour on each one of these subjects, but this is get enough to elicit some interest from folks.
Right.
So you take a battery today. You named the complexity and also the fairly new in terms of and so if you look at EV batteries, they certainly has not been the adoption of electric vehicles like everyone expected, and so there has been a slower adoption. And you buy a new Tesla today, you should have that battery for 8 years or so, maybe 10 years. Well, then there's not enough end-of-life batteries really to create an industry yet.
Got it.
So most of the recycling of lithium-ion batteries that's done today is being done from, say, cell phone and laptop batteries. So that's being done. Now there's there's a couple of ways that this happens. One is you take a bunch of lithium batteries, whether they're from a car or from a laptop, and they're shredded, and they produce something called black mass. Black mass is stage one of this process. Now, the next stage is to take that black mass and to extract the metals that would be used in the next battery. So the cobalt, the lithium, because the black mass is a conglomeration of all those materials.
Right.
Now, in order to do that, the lithium ion battery industry, the people who make those batteries, need to have a very clear idea of what kind of battery they're going to make, the elements of it, and say different car companies or different storage companies, they're all over the map in terms of the recipe or the elements of that. So if you're going to extract and recycle those materials, it's like a moving target. It's like there's no one form of battery that you can make that for. So usually now what happens is that they take the black mass and then they just produce using their own process from the black mass to a battery. It takes a lot of cost and a lot of energy and a lot of time. I'll tell you one thing that's happening, Brandon, is that most of that black mass that's being produced in Europe, the United States today, being sent to China. So we're sending this valuable, what I consider resource or asset, to China because we haven't bothered to invest in the infrastructure that would allow us to, in a way, be part of the supply chain of the future batteries.
Yeah, it's like sending a bunch of crude oil over there to get refined and then sent back.
Yeah,
right?
No, exactly. That's exactly the point. It's exactly the point. And I think people in government are beginning to wake up to that. That's even to the extent I'm an investor and advisor in a company called M2I, which is an American company that's working with the military and the government of the United States to have critical reserves of these materials, like you did oil and gas, right?
Yep.
Because of the fact that, the United States, Europe, we're vulnerable. If something were ever to create a rift with China, we'd be very vulnerable in terms of almost like the Russian gas pipeline in Europe on the Ukraine war, right? We're dependent. So I really love talking about this because you see it's all an intricate web, economics, politics, and technology.
Yeah. And it's also, frankly, I mean, it's right at the cutting edge of the sort of geopolitical economy, right? Because
100%.
Yeah. Well, so is the energy cost required to recycle one of these batteries? Is it disproportionate to the energy cost to create a virgin battery?
Yeah. Well, say for the old lead acid battery that's in your car now, unless you have an electric vehicle, or with a lithium ion battery, there's been traditional or conventional ways of recycling. Is just you heat it up as much as possible, melt it all down, and then you figure out how to take it apart again. Right. So that's been, we're all familiar with the old lead smelter. Usually, we call it a pyro form, a fire form of doing this has been traditional. Where say regenerate, what we're doing both with lead acid and lithium is we use water and chemicals. So we use, we don't use heat to any great extent. So we have a 90% less energy consumption than say traditional recycling. Because what we're doing is we're using molecular chemicals to change the actual structure of those materials so that they don't come back the same way, but even the molecular structure is different than what we receive. And this is done through a process of low intensity impact or water and chemicals. So that's the future. That's the future.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so am I hearing correctly that the molecular structure is altered in a positive way, in which way, so that there's actually...
Exactly. So take lead, your old lead battery, is that, typically it was like the lead batteries taken apart, it was shredded, and then you just throw it back to the smelter, they'd melt it, and then they'd create lead ingots and send it back to the manufacturer. What we do is that we separate out the lead from the lead paste, and which is the active material, the lead paste, and we are able to then change that molecular structure of that paste so that you put it into a new battery, and you get 40% more charge and density than the previous battery because we've changed the molecular structure. Now, why is that important? Is that, in a way, if you could imagine like a flat surface, you know, the original lead comes more in something that's very closed and like a ball. But if you create a flat surface on top of the molecular structure, you can then attach adhesives where it creates an easier way to charge that next battery. So it really is remarkable. That's what I call upcycling. When I saw recycling, people think, oh, you take it apart, you throw it back to the smelter, and then it comes back again. But it's actually you're improving the quality of that product from the previous one. So now imagine if that was our understanding of batteries, right? Every battery that's sent to us, or to anyone who's competing with us, I hope one day, can take it and make it a better battery. So then the next type around, that technology just keeps, because they're infinitely recyclable, these materials.
Oh, really? Are they infinitely improvable? Or is there
improvable? And they're improvable. So this is what I think is the dramatic leap forward, is that then I don't have to keep building cobalt mines all over the world. With every new battery made, the need to have more new cobalt, or say native cobalt, reduces. Right. So that's the goal. There is no waste; it's all asset.
Is there a diminishing return? I mean, at some point, can it sort of be optimized, or is it continuously improved every time?
Well, that's a good question, yeah, because we're taking it to say, what happens when that 40% increase comes back the next time? Are you going to be able to keep doing that? Right. I think there is at our current technology, to be frank, I think there's a cap at, how far we can go. But we have research and development happening at Cambridge University in the UK, where we're continuing to push the boundary all the time on that.
That's
so that's the right question. At what stage does that become? But maybe by that stage, who knows what kind of battery we're going to have? There's a lot of experimentation being done on batteries.
You'll be 3D printing 24 karat lead in all kinds of weird structures to make them,
Yes. I just to kind of like open our mind to that. You think about, I was talking with someone who's working with the space program, and these satellites that go up, or the space shuttle that goes up, they use the movement of the ions, the gravity pull around the moon or around a star. They use that to restore the energy that's being used up in space. So it's renewable energy, just capturing the ionization of that gravity pull. Now, so you can imagine the kind of things that we can come up with if we're creative around opening the box of where we've gone before. And I guess it's like the lead battery has been around for 100 years, no transformation, no change. But we need to really kind of be creative and innovative about how we approach storage of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good segue. You mentioned the data centers and the processors, or the processing needed with all the AI models and things, and I've dipped my toe in the water a little bit in terms of recognizing or trying to wrap my head around the problem that we're facing, or the it's like we're headed toward a road that's about to go off the cliff.
Right.
We're going to take whatever it is, 300 or 400 million vehicles that currently, or that used to run on fuel, and we're switching that to basically running off the grid, and then you add on top of it the data centers, et cetera. First of all, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on, I mean, we're way behind there. What are we going to do? There's already rolling blackouts in California. What are we going to do when, people are trying to charge their cars also?
Yeah, no, seriously, it's an enormous problem, is the expectation that the grid will be able to deliver all the demands upon it. Yeah, you're right. There's a rolling blackouts in Texas, and so you think about not just the EV cars, but what about all of the, as you mentioned, the data centers, which are demanding more and more energy. The grid, as currently conceived, can't sustain that. So that's going to take, certainly battery is going to be part of that. You take the energy created, you store it in a battery, and then you can use it at different high or low periods. You can arbitrage that energy, but
Right.
still at the end of the day, there's just the volume of energy being required. That's the next company you and I start is
Yeah.
to start addressing the grid problem,
Well,
because
you know,
it's enormous.
yeah, and I was talking about it with a colleague, and the very next day on the front page of the Journal, Wall Street Journal, that I saw that Google invested $5 billion. Or now I saw that they haven't gotten regulatory approval yet, but that they were going to invest $5 billion in nuclear.
Yeah, I can see that. I think in really, everyone's talking about a silver bullet. It's always going to be a hybrid of existing fossil fuel technology, nuclear, renewable like sun and wind, and geothermal. It's going to be a blend, but no matter what we come up with, there's going to be a demand for it. And
Yeah.
that's one thing for sure is our demand is growing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think in investment in energy innovation is not a bad investment right now.
I love it. I love it. I do want to highlight what you said that I don't think is obvious to a whole lot of people. The how batteries play into solving that riddle or that puzzle, because the worst thing we could do is just sort of have this kind of on-demand power consumption where if everybody in the world wants to turn on their lights, then the power supplies go down, right? But if you could store it, you could sort of flex with the demand, and without companies like yours that are enhancing that technology, the ability to store power effectively, we're in real trouble.
No, exactly, and there's going to be more and more of that. And that's why I'm focusing on increasing the power capacity of our batteries, whether it's with a vehicle or with a storage battery. But I'm also on the board and investor in a company in the UK called Zendo, which is arbitraging the energy that exists within that battery. Say you have a data center, you have a battery, instead of using that energy when everyone's online. Well, look at the low times when all the lights are on, say in the middle of the night. That's a good time then to use the battery energy where it's lower cost for you. You can do more of your computing energy, right? Your AI or whatever your energy consumption. Do some of your operations then, and then when it's a high time, then reduce it. So you get more efficient, lower cost. Now those battery centers are another line of revenue, so you're really incentivizing them to do so.
Oh, wow.
So I think you're going to see a lot of intelligent systems around both batteries and energy grids. And so that's going to also rely on more and more innovation for greater energy displacement or distribution. Yeah. So these things, it's almost like, I love science fiction, but I like it. And so I'm thinking always ahead about, how could that look differently? When I met this rocket scientist the other day, he said they were using the ions around a gravity flow. I was thinking, oh my gosh, okay, so how did that fit into where we are now, right?
Wow,
so,
yeah. Gosh, that's fast. It reminds me of the innovation that, I don't know if this is a Tesla innovation or if this has been around for a while, but the fact that they use the inertia, like when braking, to help recharge the batteries in the.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. So one thing that, without giving away too much, that Regenerate we're exploring is called the lead lithium battery. It's a hybrid battery, so that the lead and the lithium they have different functions. Lead is better for long-term storage, more cost efficient, very effective. For lithium is that energy charge. So if you have a hybrid battery, is that for when you really need a specific energy charge, use the lithium side, and use the lead side when you need a longer term energy source. So that's just a very simple innovation, but this is where I'm excited about Regenerate. We're a battery technology company. We're not a recycler, but recycling gives us a way into taking materials that today are plentiful and finding a repurpose for them.
So what's your company? What's Regenerative's biggest obstacle for growth right now?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest obstacle, and thanks for asking that question, is bureaucracy around permits. And permits typically are locally given. There's some good reasons for safety that sometimes, other times it's more just uh, you know, a fear of somehow losing control of your, and your territory. And so, all over the world, it's been very difficult to get permits that
Permitting
allow
for the
you to do
storage or for the manufacturing or for the actual
for the manufacturing to treat
Okay.
the materials,
Okay.
tips, even lead, right? It's like, okay, so it, and it's based, unfortunately, on say 100 years ago, where we're afraid of what those materials will do. Instead of thinking, okay, let's think about more creative ways that they could safely handle these materials. Is based on, well, if you're not, if we know there's been problems in the past, so let's not do anything in the
Yeah.
future.
It's the Chernobyl
And
effect,
so,
right?
yeah, exactly. So it's not just for a recycler, but it's also for a battery manufacturer. So it really does slow down the manufacturing. So we're trying to find, innovative ways of dealing with that. But that's been one of the biggest challenges.
So it's a supply side thing.
I'd say outside of that, we're, you know, because there is so much uncertainty in how to make a better battery. Um, Really, what needs to happen is more of a marriage between the people who are making new batteries and the people who are supplying the materials for that. And in fact, there needs to be a kind of a co-design, because the people who are dealing with materials understand the potential of those materials and how they can be used in a future battery.
Yeah.
And they don't want to become a manufacturer. So I think there's a real good, I think, more coordination between people making batteries and people supplying them, rather than kind of the people who supply materials are just kind of guessing, just giving materials without really a thoughtful, strategic approach to
Where they're sourced.
shaping what those materials look like.
I got you. That God, there's so many different layers and levels to what you're doing.
No, there really is. But I'm really excited about it, because I think it, what we're doing is we're trying to regenerate energy, so we're coming up with new solutions. And I think it's, if I was a young entrepreneur right now, I'd like to throw myself into solving big problems and the rewards for that economically are going to come to the entrepreneur, but also a sense of satisfaction that they're solving something. It's very intellectually and emotionally engaging.
Absolutely. And fulfilling. And I mean, gosh, talk about wanting to leave your mark on the world.
Yeah, I think so.
Even just a participant in helping shape policy or a new technology or a new process that, reduces our footprint on the planet, leaves quite a mark. So I think often, you mentioned if you were a young entrepreneur, I think that young entrepreneurs are, and I may get skewered for this, but I think young entrepreneurs are plentiful. And I think ideas inside the heads of young entrepreneurs are plentiful. I think there's a self-limiting belief that, look, I'm not a hedge fund manager. I'm not a partner in a venture capital firm. And I don't have generational wealth that I could, if I wanted to, that I could devote to this. So I'm too small. I'm too little. I'm not going to change the energy industry. What do you say to the young, hungry, smart, driven entrepreneurs that feel like they're not invited to the game because they don't have the resources to make a difference?
Yeah, I think it's a really good insight. I agree with you. I think there's a lot of passion and idealism around what they'd like to do, but then almost feeling disempowered. That, what can I do?
Exactly.
So I would say, I would say for 95, 98% of those folks, I would say go find a emerging company that would give you the kind of access to the network, give you access to ideas, give you experience. Get involved in them now. I was a young entrepreneur, in Silicon Valley when these little companies like Yahoo and Amazon and, they were all coming along. And I was like, man, I just threw myself into it, not really even knowing what it was all about. And it's amazing how you start becoming in a very short time, because it's an emerging industry. You become someone who one of a handful of players, and so it's if you're not in the game, you're not in the game. And so if you're not in the game, you feel disempowered because like, oh, what can I do? But it's a great opportunity right now because there are so many companies emerging in hydrogen, the future of what I do, batteries, uh, renewables in general. Great time for young entrepreneurs to get involved, and then maybe start your own company after you have this network and you've met some, potential investors. And so, I have a daughter in London who, she got involved. 22 years old, she jumped in with the founder of Twitter Square, Jack Dorsey.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
she joined Square and got involved in that company, and now she's doing her own fintech company. But she spent 5-6 years learning from Jack and learning how it works, and it served her well. And she didn't do too poorly with the shares she got from Square either.
Oh,
But
sure.
it was just so my recommendation is it's not all or nothing. It's not. I can't change my, I work at a major tech company. I can't change anything, or I have to go start my own thing. And I think that there's a middle ground, which actually is a great platform. Now, for every time I say that, there's an Elon Musk who just does his own thing, right?
Yeah.
But for 95 to 99% of the folks out there, their best pathways to entrepreneurs, get some mentoring and experience and build your network. Which
Yeah.
I find, you probably find, Brandon, most valuable thing we have is our network and the people who trust us and get behind what we do.
Absolutely. But gosh, there's so much wisdom in what you just said to the entrepreneur that feels like they can't make a difference, or that they're just one small cog in a huge machine. What I heard you say is, look, you got to get it. You got to come jump in the pool. You got to come to the party.
You really do. Both feet. You got to get in.
And like everything in life, most likely you will find it's a small world.
It really is true. It's really true. And, listen, it's funny. I'm a writer as well. I write books, and people often ask me, it's relevant for entrepreneurialism, but they ask me, my God, like, how do you write a 200-page book? And I said, you don't write a 200-page book. You write a 1-page, and you're your first reader. And as you're writing, you're going, oh my God, I didn't even know that. You don't even know what you're going to come up with. And I think this is like entrepreneurialism, that if you're not in the game, you don't know what kinds of things you can innovate or create or something to be a part of.
Yeah.
And so the hardest part of writing a book is not writing. So it's the same with being an entrepreneur. And so allow yourself to create.
Yeah.
And put yourself in the conditions where you can create.
I love God. I wish I could figure out how to blast this from the world's loudspeaker to all the entrepreneurs, right? Just jump in, and
Exactly.
you don't have to know but you'll find out the water's too hot. Well, you need a solution for
Absolutely.
that, right?
Exactly. 100%. I really believe that, and I've just seen it manifest itself in the lives of so many entrepreneurs I know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
As long as my opinion is, if you have the passion and the will, you'll find yourself there, and then the answer will be sitting next to you.
Yeah.
You might fail 6 or 7 times, and then the successful answer might be, I don't know, 2 or 3 years away. But
it's funny. When I was young, I was in my early 20s, so I became a journalist. Started writing for Wired magazine.
Oh wow!
And I wrote for the New York Times and Wired, and so I got recruited out of Wired to start a new magazine called Business 2.0. And I was one of a handful of editors that started that magazine. And this is where I got to interview all these early, digital companies like Amazon, Yahoo. And so one day I was interviewing the founders of eBay, right? And so I was, just being a journalist, a writer. And I'd say, so tell me, how, really interesting. You have an auction software, seller and buyer. So, well, how are you going to make money? And so one of the founders, said, well, gave me an answer why he thought, charging the seller would be. I go, oh, okay. So then I have a pause, and he leans forward and says, so what do you think of that? And so I said, well, I don't know. I'd be worried about X, Y, Z. I thought, one founder turns to the other founder and says, see, I told you that won't work. And they start arguing with each other. And I went, oh my God, you guys are making this up, aren't you?
Yeah.
I said, and it really hit me. That's what they're doing. They're making it up. And I thought, I think I'd rather be right at making it up than writing about someone else making it up. Oh. So that's when I jumped in the pool, when I realized that these guys are just like all of us, and we think that, this is something, if you read Elon Musk's biography, that, just about every company that he got involved in almost went bankrupt, whether it was PayPal and so we think that these guys are all magical. No, they are on that brink of not making it. They're trying to figure out how to do it.
Yep.
And so this is why I say to young entrepreneurs, is get in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love Isaacson's biography on Musk. And you're exactly right, because most of the time, most of his adult life has been in some type of conflict or strife with his, whether it's with his partners or his investors or what have you. So, gosh, I wish we had 2 or 3 hours, and I'd love to get. You've got a lot of wisdom and experience that I think the audience is really going to enjoy listening to.
Well, thank you, Brandon. It's a real pleasure being on. Not oftentimes I feel like I forget we're on air or filming a podcast here, but it's just kind of a fun conversation. So I really appreciate it.
Well, that's the best compliment I think I've ever gotten, because that's the hope is to find really, really interesting people that are doing really interesting things like yourself, and then just talk about it, because, this is sort of getting old, and I think it's becoming more apparent, but these types of formats, right? So a conversation, a long form conversation, as opposed to, look, I'm going to give you 6 questions and you can answer every question in 15 words or less, right? So you get this sound bite. But these long-form conversations is sort of this antithesis of, what we have heard in terms of headlines and things like that. I just think there's so much wisdom and a lot to be learned, because you can find, the specific things that you're interested in, and then go listen to people who've done it before, talk about it for 3 or 4 hours. But
that's exactly. If you're a curious person, then that's the pathway to knowledge, right?
Absolutely.
Pursue that curiosity for people who are different or have experiences you don't.
Right. All right. Well, Dave, one final question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned you were in your early 20s and you were a journalist. You've done a lot of really interesting things, by the way. But if you had a chance to go back and talk to that 22-year-old Dave, and you had 1 or 2 minutes, and you were able to just pass along a piece of advice or two, what would you tell that person?
I would say, believe in yourself. You don't know what you don't know, not out of arrogance, but out of aggressive humility. And when I say aggressive humility, is that you proactively are putting yourself in situations that maybe you don't know where it's going to lead, or if you have all the answers, and then you have enough humility to be upfront about that. But that doesn't slow down your aggressiveness, that you keep moving forward, you keep pursuing. So I think for every, my own 22-year-old self, I had to learn that later in life, but I try to communicate that now to young people in my life.
I love that. All right, young entrepreneurs, you heard it from the man himself. I don't think that there's many pieces of better advice, big picture wise. Believe in yourself. Go jump in the pool. Fantastic. Well, Dave, I have sincerely enjoyed time with you, and I appreciate your willingness to sit down with us. I think this is going to be a great episode.
Thanks, Brandon. Good luck on all your other episodes. I'm sure you'll meet more interesting people. Take care.
All right. Appreciate it. Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.